Hey, it's Joel. Today's episode's with SendCutSend's Jim Belosic, and it's a good one. A gentle soul who does kick-ass stuff. I love that company, and it's been exciting to see them grow. I wanted to catch you up on Tool or Die. When we started this 4 months ago, we had no idea that we would get the response that we've gotten. I appreciate every email and every comment, especially the ones that have said, this is exactly the kind of show that I always wished existed, where you're talking to founders, but you're also talking to engineers, and you're talking to tradespeople, and you're also talking to operators and people that are behind the scenes. I feel that way too, which is why I'm going full-time in on Tool or Die. Over the next year, we're going to be hitting the road, visiting factories, tracking down made in America, family-owned companies that have never been on camera before. Anybody that we think has a good story to tell about manufacturing and reindustrialization in the US, we're going to talk to them. We have some great sponsors lined up, but you can help too. And this is the same old shtick. You know exactly what I'm going to ask, but it's really basic stuff, and it really does help at this stage of the game. ToolOrDie.com. If you can subscribe to the Substack and to your email, it's amazing. If you subscribe to the podcast in your favorite podcast app, if the spirit moves you and you can count to 5, you want to leave a review, that'd be even better. I think there's a real moment in this country to make something better than we've had in our lifetimes. And I'm really excited for Tool or Die to be part of it. Whether you work in a factory now, whether you hope to work in a new factory, whether you just want to have the benefits of living in a country where your friends and neighbors make the stuff that you buy and have good jobs that are safe jobs that provide a fair living for them. This is now, this is the time. So if you want to help, have a really awkward moment with one of your friends or coworkers and say, I'm listening to a podcast with a guy who barely understands how a lathe works, but he's talking to the right people. Anything you can do to send people our way as audience or guest or just people that we should know that we can learn from helps tremendously. I really appreciate it. Thanks for listening. And here's SendCutSend's Jim Belosic.
I forgot to ask you how much swearing is on here.
As much as you like. It depends.
I won't go overboard. I just tend to say shitty or something.
We adhere to whatever standards your priest or pastor holds you to, so you're fine. I am joined today by Jim Belosic of SendCutSend, CEO and co-founder. I don't know if your other founder's still in the mix, but been really excited to talk to you. SendCutSend is a company that I know because a few years ago when I was running into projects, I was like, maybe somebody could make some parts for me. And I did the same rigmarole that I think a lot of people have done over the years, where I called some people up and said, can you make this? And they said no, or yeah, we can make it, but it costs $100,000 in molds and all of this stuff. And then I ran into, at the time, what was a little company called SendCutSend that was like, yep, you need some plate steel, we can cut that out. We can get it to you. So thanks for coming on Tool or Die. When did the company start? Give me the origin story. How did you go from software, if I'm remembering correctly, into hardware?
Yeah, actually, even before software, it was more marketing and web design. Web design forced me into software because all the web stuff started getting more and more complex. And I was like, well, in order to make a more complex website, I should probably learn a little bit of software, or at least hire some great people. So yes, did software, B2B SaaS, for about 10 years. During that time, at the beginning of the software company, it's super fun. You're solving crazy problems, you're growing. Towards year 8, 9, 10, things flatten out a little bit. You have a good team. You're not putting out fires every day. So in order to kind of keep that insanity that drives me, I was like, well, I'm going to start working out in the shop a little bit more. I've always been a car guy. I've always been a fabricator. And the software company gave me enough time to go wrench on stuff, at lunch or after work or whatever. It also helped that the shop was attached to our software building. So we had 5,000 square feet of office and then 5,000 square feet of shop.
Jim's bullshit.
Yeah, just absolute chaos back there. But it was cool because, a lot of guys at the company were into cars too. So we always had something up on a lift or some kind of crazy contraption that we were all collaborating on. And I was like, man, this is why I look forward to coming into work. to do these types of projects, not, B2B SaaS. Anyway, fast forward a little bit, the projects started becoming more and more complex, and I needed parts that I couldn't just get off the shelf. I couldn't go to Summit or Jegs or whatever and get these parts. They had to be manufactured. Got turned down by many, many people because I'm like, hey, I need this like really intricate dashboard inlay, but I only need one of them. Can you make it for me this week? And you get laughed out of so many shops when you ask for something that week, or maybe even that month, and then God forbid you only want to pay fair market value for it. So I was like, wait, we're smart software guys. Maybe we can build some software that helps these shops run really smoothly. And we kind of pitched that idea around a little bit, made a proof of concept, and then quickly realized that a lot of these legacy shops were not interested in our fancy smancy software. They're like, how am I going to fax things to my customers? And where am I going to mail the prints?
Not to stop you, but it's like I see this a lot with a lot of like the next wave of companies that are moving through software companies, ERP systems or sales systems or whatever. It's not often a question of like these shops being unwilling or stupid, to be able to use the software. It's them going, I have to change the way I do business. Like how I actually make the stuff is totally different. And that's a really key thing in this reindustrializing moment is like, you got to also meet these people where they're at if you expect to get a customer out of them.
That was the turning point for us. So this was 2017, 2018. So yeah, about 7 years ago now, almost. We're like, oh, wait a second. Software is a portion of it. It's not all of it. And to do it right, I was like, well, I think we have to buy some equipment and just do it. If nothing else, to teach us how to make a better software product. If you're going to make automotive software, you should probably have a car, So at that moment, we were trying to get into manufacturing, but we had no manufacturing capability. Took a bit of a gamble and bought a, $600,000 or $700,000 laser. And I was like, okay, here we go. We're going to get into sheet metal. But the only thing that I need is I just need it to make enough money to pay for its payment, because I still had the software company, but I wanted this really cool, machine that I had access to because I was like, ooh, I get my parts for free, if I can get this thing used by a bunch of other people. So that's really how it started. It's just, an internal need. And I just wanted a few people to use it so that I could make my payment and, cover a couple guys to operate the machine. But we quickly discovered that there was a lot of guys out there like me who just needed, stuff for their hobbies or whatever. And ever since 2018, we've just been growing like crazy and have always been capacity constrained. So always trying to buy new machines, always adding more square footage. And I'm still very interested in this business because it's chaos every single day. And I'm never bored. And usually when I'm bored, that's when I move on to something else. So I can't see that happening for the foreseeable future.
In those first days, like, when you're talking about, there was a bunch of people out there that needed what I wanted, and that we've been over capacity every time. Like, how would you frame that? Like, because there's tinkerers like me who are like, I need this one part, and I'm never going to mass market it. It's not worth selling or whatever. Was that a lot of your original customer set? Was like a lot of people who were like, I just need one, but now I can finally do it and somebody can help me.
Yeah, that was 100% of our business plan was just do one, quantity one, low volume, high mix. We'll serve that market that I believed was underserved. We've never targeted, Fortune 500 or Fortune 50 or whatever, or any enterprise sales because those guys are already well served. If you're a big company, you can walk into a dozen manufacturers in your town and they'll roll out the red carpet for you and they'll beg for that work. So I was trying to go for, the everyman. What we discovered is going after that market, it gets you in the door of a lot of other places. So if you go after someone's hobby, usually the guys who have a hobby have a day job, and so they'll bring you to work with them. And I would actually encourage, anyone who's thinking about going into hardware to take that same approach. If you want to start manufacturing furniture, manufacture furniture for a designer. Make one or two chairs. And if those chairs sell, then they're going to order 50 and then 100. And then, you grow with that customer. So that's what we've been doing. We have a lot of customers who have actually graduated from us Our concept of churn is when they go buy their own equipment. So it's really cool to see these guys starting out at, kitchen table or in their garage, and they order 1 unit, then 10, then 100, then 1,000, then 100,000. And then at some point, we're just like, dude, you should just buy a machine. Yeah, because we just can't keep up with you. So that's a really cool feeling. It's cool to power a bunch of those businesses. And then we always end up having a relationship because there's always weird stuff that we can handle that other people can't. So we end up having like a pretty long relationship with our customers.
Because I'm the world's worst host, I'm going to set up what you do that's different now, 5 minutes in, for people. But the difference of what SendCutSend does, I would frame, and jump in with, if I get this wrong, but I would frame it as what 3D printing did for being able to make anything in 3D almost entirely in plastic at home. SendCutSend was filling a space in metal, largely in metal, to be able to say, hey, you can't 3D print metal at home, which is still the case by and large. And if you want to work with metal, you need a lot of equipment, hand tools, and certain things you can do certain things with. But a lot of times with metal, you just need one part for its mechanical abilities. And what SendCutSend was able to do with that first laser cutting sheet metal machine is go upload a CAD file to us. You do that work, and we will send you back in the mail that part. What is revolutionary about it was the high mix part, that it really could just be one. And maybe it's kind of a ridiculous price if I was trying to buy 1,000, because I'm just going to pull a number up, some projects I've done over the years. Like, I think some steel parts that I bought from SendCutSend probably cost me like $60 a part. And if I was sending that out to a big factory, it would have been like 70 cents a part at scale.
Yep.
But it was fine for me because there was a middle ground there. Talk to me about how you were able to do the high mix part, because that's one thing I have no understanding. Because most people, when they look at a business like this, and the reason I think a lot of this business type of business didn't start until recently, is that people just went, there's no way I can make money on a high mix thing because the setup times and everything else is too crazy. Like, how did you solve that?
Yeah, that's where the software comes in. That's also where us not knowing what the hell we're doing comes in. I think, a lot of people who have experience in manufacturing or sheet metal or CNC machining or whatever, they don't tackle problems like this because they know too much. They've seen where it fails. They've tried it before and it sucks. We're just like dumb and just said, well, this is what we're doing. And so it forced us to solve some problems that, knowing I was walking into those problems, I probably wouldn't have stopped, even started. But because we didn't know what we didn't know, we just blindly went in there. So the key with high mix is it actually works at scale. The larger the volume of high mix, the easier things get. It's because you can really start to understand bell curves. You can start to understand your outliers. You can understand your meat and potatoes, especially with sheet cutting. With sheet cutting, like the software side of us, it allows us to take hundreds of different customers and with a quantity of one part each and put them onto a sheet, like Tetris. We nest it all together and run it all at once. So it saves us, we only do one setup for potentially, dozens or hundreds of customers. We do one load into the machine. We only retrieve the material once. And then we have really, really good sheet utilization. So we have almost no scrap. It's probably one of the lowest in the industry. It doesn't work, though, when you only do a few. Like, if I was to run one of those customers at a time, we'd be bankrupt. It's like it takes money to make money kind of thing. It takes scale to get scale.
Is the way you get to scale because of efficiencies. And efficiency in the scrap is definitely, I'm sure, a factor, but also in the setup times. Like, somebody still has to go through and move all of that in. You're almost approaching it as kind of similar to the way that Amazon did, just in pick and place and a lot of efficiencies in shipping over the years. What does some of your right before graduation customers look like? Because one of the things that's really interesting to me about SendCutSend in the business right now is, I would imagine you do have a lot of customers who are like pretty big and buying low mix, high volume things. But what are some customers that are like that? Like, how is that part of the business grown? Because you've kind of become a vendor in some ways to that set of customers.
Yeah, it's really weird because we actually have a bunch of customers with our identical equipment. We use big Amada lasers, and we know a lot of Amada shops, uh, and they still order from us. And it's because, like, if they're going to run, 1 million units or something, that might be on the schedule for 3 months or 6 months or something like that. Hey, I only need 5,000 parts. They can't disrupt their production in order to do that. So that's when they come to us. The other way that we just tackle scales with scale. We didn't really have this concept of customers graduating from us for many years. They'd slowly grow, and then they leave. And now that we understand that concept, we're like, how do we prevent that at all costs? We're trying to use just loads of capacity in order to prevent that in the future. So we have our facility in Reno, Nevada. That's our headquarters. We have one in Paris, Kentucky, and then we have our newest facility in Arlington, Texas. And our goal is to always be able to handle the quantity, no matter if it's 1 or 1 million, by having machines that are available. And then also just purchasing insane amounts of material so that hopefully we're able to provide a finished part for less than you can buy the raw material. And that's where our buying power comes in. So, you mentioned, Amazon is a shipping company. They're a logistics company. I thought that we were a manufacturer, and really we're a shipping company. We're a logistics company. Uh, that takes up a lot of our time and effort, is figuring out these weird shipping issues or capacity issues. Making the parts is actually kind of the easy part sometimes. Just making sure that we always have surge capacity available, and it's not something that I think you could plan for. It's something that you have to react to. We were unable to predict that in year 1 or 2 because our growth curve was like super spiky, and you just have no idea what's going to hit that day. Now, after millions and millions of parts that we've manufactured, and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of orders, we can start to see trends, or we can start to get really smart around predictions. It allows us to plan the capacity, get the machines and staff ready, and we don't have a whole lot of idle machines, but we're also hitting our deadlines at the same time. So there's no magic bullet. It's just like, do it for years and get punched in the face every single day, and then pivot really, really quickly.
You have 150 different materials, something like that. Like, you have a lot of variety, but in the grand scheme of manufacturing, that's a pretty small slice of things that people actually use to make stuff, even just in sheet. But I understand that scale on a supply side. Like, you can just buy it up, you'll get through it eventually. It's fine to store it for a while. How does that look on the machine side, including operation and operators? I would also think a manufacturer, a large scale manufacturer, could look at your business and say, all right, well, the capex to buy a bunch of these machines is a few $1,000,000, but if we could put this software layer over the top too, like, we would always be able to get the same efficiencies. But I don't see very few people doing that, because a lot of the large scale manufacturing, one, is disintermediated across the globe. Like they put a bunch of their parts in different places. But also because I think they tend to either plan to build a big line when they're ready to commit to a big product run, and they never think about going that step up and saying, why don't we just build some facilities that have a ton of machines, and they'll be able to service us for years as we develop, and even develop and engineer some of the product against the capabilities of the machines they have. Uh, that started as a question. I don't know if I landed in a question, but my question is, like, do you think that is a factor of why manufacturing in general doesn't happen that way? Is the machine investment for you a major one, or is it actually incidental?
Yeah, the machine doesn't factor in that much to our overall investment when it comes to capacity. The biggest challenge for us is square footage. The lasers are very large, and they need a lot of accessory equipment. And then, just the material is huge too, and it takes up a huge amount of space. So you're not just buying, $1 million laser, you're buying, the sheet storage, you're buying the liquid nitrogen to feed the thing, you're buying nitrogen generators, you're bringing in, all types of, massive amounts of amperage of electricity to a facility. We air condition all of our facilities too, to maintain temperature and humidity and everything, so that our stuff isn't rusting on the shelf. So there's this huge investment in a building. And then once the building is there, then adding the equipment isn't really that bad. I think the reason why, a lot of a lot of like large scale manufacturers, have issues is because the larger scale you go, the more specialized the equipment gets and the more specialized the line gets. It becomes very inflexible. And we've always tried to be very, very flexible no matter how big we get. So, I don't know what's coming in the next hour, but we have to serve it. But if I knew that I was going to make 50 million units of one thing for 3 years, it'd be really easy to design a line for that. But God forbid you decide to change that product or that material, then you're stuck with this massive line and 6 months of downtime and changing everything around. So the flexibility that job shops provide is, I think it's a good combination with large scale manufacturing, and it always will be.
There's two frames here, which one is more, not quite science fiction, but it's definitely more optimistic. The idea that shops like yours at scale, really practical software and business intelligence meets manufacturing. If like there were 1,000 SendCutSends, there's such an interesting model for reindustrialization and resilience in particular for companies to be able to say, I don't even need to build my own line until I reach this like very high threshold where I can find those efficiencies, because there's all these companies, individually owned or not, that can operate within this system, and I can put in my CAD and I could put in, maybe even some DMF stuff and get a little further along, print, and these 1,000 factories start, moving products. But is the model perhaps to go into the large American companies and say, you need to make your product design more capable of receiving certain parts that are more modular, still from a SendCutSend, still from an Oshcut, still from modern job shops? Like, how much is the design of the product dictating whether they can actually participate in that type of future or not?
I think there's two sides to that. So the first half of your question, that market kind of already exists but it's like Xometry does a really good job of exposing that. There's 10,000 guys in their garage with a Haas VF2 that can machine a part, except they just have really shitty visibility. They have a bad website or no website or whatever. So Xometry gives them that exposure. 1,000 SendCutSends or something without a broker model would be able to do that. But I think there is part of that there today. The other side is, or the second half of your question, design your stuff so that a manufacturer can make it. That's huge for us. At the very beginning, we actually lost a bunch of customers because they're like, okay, here's my CAD model, but then also here's my print. And please look at the print for all my tolerances and stuff. And I was like, I'm not going to look at your print. I'm going to make whatever the model is. And people could not get their head around that just because that's how it's always been done. What they haven't realized is CAD has progressed at such a level where the models are very, very accurate. CNC machines have progressed to where they can produce accurate things based on a model. The tolerances that the machines hold are just by default good to go. There's not a whole lot of inspection that needs to happen. But back in the day when you're running a manual Bridgeport, prints were really critical. So, fast forward to today, we've made, 50 million parts without a print. We hold our tolerance and everything's good. Our reject rate is near zero. It's taken us a long time though to kind of shift that mindset. We still have older mechanical engineers, guys that are in their 60s or 70s, and they refuse to work with us because they need to send the print. On the opposite side, we have a bunch of young engineers who are in school or they've graduated. They're at their first job. They don't know how to do a good print. They're just like, hey man, here's my output from NX or SolidWorks or whatever. Can you make this for me? And we're like, yeah, go nuts. The issue that we run into, though, is a lot of these guys have never actually seen a machine. They will design insane stuff that cannot be manufactured. So by having a really small menu and being strict on what we accept, it forces them to go back and adjust their design strategy, adjust their product a little bit in order to meet the manufacturer's needs. I'm trying to lead that way. There's a lot of other guys who are doing the same. We always talk about it like the In-N-Out menu. In-N-Out burger. You can get a hamburger or a cheeseburger. Like, that's it. There's some secret menu stuff on there, but not a lot of people know about it. You don't walk up to In-N-Out and ask for a chicken sandwich. You don't ask for your burger medium rare, So that's what we do. We say, hey, look, this is what you designed. We can't make it. But if you make these changes, then we totally can, and you'll be a lifelong customer. Even if you don't use us, you understanding the limitations in sheet metal or CNC machining or whatever, it's going to make you a better designer. It's going to make you a better customer. And you can actually go almost anywhere in the world. If it works with SendCutSend, it'll work with just about anybody. That education around design for manufacturability is probably our biggest challenge and an ongoing challenge. But I really hope that it goes into other industries too. I'd love to see more around like injection molding or even woodworking or something like that. Like, help me design a piece of furniture that is easy to manufacture, not one that's going to jack the price up 10x because I added some little feature in there that requires some sort of custom machine or a custom bit or something like that.
Because you're effectively like Lego, right? Like for your customers, you're going, we've got 150 pieces or whatever you want to say, and we're about to add this one. What would you do with it? How do you approach that? Are you largely looking at data? Are you listening to customers to say, okay, you do want CNC, we're going to figure out how to add CNC to this? Like, how do you make that determination?
Yeah, it's a mix. There's a lot of data. Again, coming from software roots, data is something that we're just born with. Like, we start with that right off the bat. So we probably have too much data. We just have a fire hose that we're getting hit with all the time. We have data, and then we have the requests. We have our eyes and ears open all the time. We're very, very hands-on with our customer support teams and our DFM teams. That's how we build relationships with our customers, and we listen. They're like, hey, man, it'd be so great if you guys had this UHMW plastic, or hey, I really need this grade of stainless steel. As we start to hear that and we start to like kind of tally votes for that, that's how we lean in. But I would say the absolute most important way that we determine new materials and services and features is by being a customer. I was customer number one. I'm customer number one for everything that we offer, whether that's powder coat colors or anodizing or CNC machining. I need CNC machined parts. I need them for my projects. We need them internally. We had a machine go down, and of course, it's like this weird Japanese part that only exists, like they only make like 2 a year or something like that. We managed to break it because that's what we're good at. And I was like, oh shit, we need the capability to make this. And so we ended up using a local machine shop, and it was really difficult. And then I was like, well, this is kind of going back to our roots. Like, should we get into this? And then when you look at our customers, there's a lot of overlap. If you're doing sheet metal, you're doing a lot of CNC machining and vice versa. The thing that has screwed us up and screwed up the whole industry, going back to DFM, is 3D printing. 3D printing is one of those things where, people look at, like you said, you look at an iPhone and you're like, wow, I can't believe that they made this. Well, it's because Apple made all these bespoke machines and bespoke fasteners, and they developed their own adhesives, to get everything to fit together. When people are designing stuff for 3D printing, they're like, well, it worked on my printer. I'm going to go ahead and send it off to get it machined. You run into just a huge can of worms just because it's such a different technology. Subtractive is so much more challenging than additive. So we're trying to navigate that right now. Just do more education, expose more of our manufacturing process to our customers so they can actually see how it's made. I wish that every customer could come through the shop and actually run our machines. Like, come run a CNC press brake for a little while. You'll see exactly where it collides and why we have these issues. Or come try and like tap this tiny hole in really thick steel right on the edge. You'll see why we have these restrictions. So the more we can do about that, it just makes the customers better. And like you said, if they don't end up using us, they can use anyone. Because all of our stuff, all of our equipment is just stuff that you can buy. We make some custom modifications to things to make them run a little more efficiently. But if it works for us, it's going to work anywhere.
If you were to approach somebody and say, you've never used SendCutSend before, but you've been designing your own stuff for 3D printing, like what are like the top 3 things that you'd say, this is the stuff you need to think about?
Sheet metal, we're pretty successful. If it's 3D printed and then someone is brave enough to think that it would work in sheet metal, they're usually pretty good. But with CNC machining, that's where it gets wild. I guess people just have to think about if you could hold that part in your hand, but then you had to carve it out with a screwdriver, could you do that? Literally take a screwdriver and hold it in your hand and move it around to these different features, and you'll quickly realize like, oh, I can't get the tip of the screwdriver in there. Like, there's no way I could reach that pocket. Keep in mind, everything we do is done with circular tools. So it's a drill or an end mill or whatever. It's all circular. So a lot of people like to put 90-degree, edges on things, and it's not going to happen. Now, our radiuses are really small, but there will be a radius. So I think people just don't know. They've heard of CNC machining and they've maybe seen a part, maybe they've seen a video on YouTube or something like that, but they don't actually understand what the tools are doing, how the machine works, what the limitations of the machines are. So if I could go to every high school in the country and give them all, equipment or something, I wish I could, and just be like, hey, everyone needs to see what these tools are, see where they're going to hit, see where they're not going to hit. And then from that point on, from an 18-year-old person graduating high school, they would have a career of just machinable parts. It'd be 100% perfect. So unfortunately, they're getting their start at 9 years old on a 3D printer, and then that's their expectation. So equipment is evolving very, very rapidly. Like the new 5-axis CNC machines are really incredible with what they can do. You can run a really, really long tool in there and do some really fine, intricate details, but it's still not quite what you think. It's not going to meet your expectation if you 3D printed this insane thing. That's why there's so much investment going into like 3D metal printing, basically, where it's centered or whatever. That's how you can make these crazy rocket nozzles with internal cooling channels. Parts that have never been able to be made are being able to be made now. Those are just really cost prohibitive to manufacture.
It's funny when I think about some of those like Foundry Lab and all of this stuff where I'm like, well, if I am teaching a 9-year-old 3D printing, but now by the time they hit the workforce, some of that might actually be more capable than what CNC can do now. But yeah, tool pathing is a tough one, I think, for people to understand if they come out of 3D printing. I will say my biggest defense of 3D printing now, besides the kind of general purpose maker energy of like it's just cool to make things, and the reward loop is very good for people to, even if they're just printing somebody else's design. But the biggest part for me is that there's no more direct and safe way for anyone to learn CAD than 3D printing. And it's like, even if you're only learning a tiny little bit of CAD, if you were really going to get into machining and other things, there's a lot more that you would need to know. Even just as an example, I'll tell you the last thing I got from SendCutSend. I was mounting a rooftop tent to a car that like I just needed a little step off piece. There just wasn't quite the right width and everything. It's the only time I've ever one-shotted something in CAD where I made it. I hit print on the first version and I took it out to the car and it fit perfect. It had like
So
all this
good.
stuff. I
Yeah.
was like, holy shit, I am good at CAD now. Like I'm incredible. I'm going to build a space shuttle. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh, to get this CNC'd just for the metal alone is going to be like 300 or 400 bucks. And I was like heartbroken because I went through the whole thing. I was like, maybe there's some sort of exotic 3D printing process that'll be cheaper, none of it within my budget. And so what I ended up doing is turning around and taking the same measurements that I'd done from the beginning. And I went, what if I had a bunch of plate steel that I have SendCutSend make, and I'm gonna stack that plate steel in a way and use some fasteners that would still get my endpoints exactly where I needed it to be. But I can do it for $100 or whatever it ended up being. And it worked, and it was uglier, and it was not as satisfying in the design standpoint, but it was the only solution that was going to work to actually be safe enough, to be strong enough. It had to be metal. I didn't have a choice to use something else. And I still ended up really loving that process because at the end, I put my like rooftop tent on some bars of a car that weren't actually built for it, but I did it in a way that worked and it was safe and it was done. But I do think that there's like a real gap right now between people learning CAD and engineering in schools and then actually being able to work in projects. And funnily enough, I had no idea that you came from like a car dork background, but we've seen so much of that even on Tool or Die. It's one of the last places where people actually have projects that need real strength of materials, real dimension of materials. The large scale of it leads them to metal and manufacturing, but in a way that only, 1 out of 1,000 might actually go buy a Bridgeport and start machining stuff for their hobby. But something like SendCutSend will actually allow them to do it. From a project sense, like what should people be building right now if they're 16, 17, 18? How should they be using SendCutSend? Like what should they be tackling to actually learn more of the DFM part?
Yeah. I mean, I started out building go-karts, scrapped lawnmowers and trying to make a go-kart out of them, when I was 9 years old, because we didn't have the internet. So you just go back out behind the woodshed and see what you can figure out.
Before the internet, we had gallons of gas and a milk jug, and then we figured out what to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah, 100% Briggs and Strattons, and go for it. So something that we see now that's really positive is like combat robotics. People are into battle bots and, Norwalk Havoc and, whatever, all the different groups that are making these, cool little battle bots. And then same thing goes for like FIRST robotics. So competitive robotics competitions in high schools is very, very popular, growing all the time. It's giving kids that initial exposure, not only to robotics and software, but also into the manufacturing. We sponsor dozens, if not hundreds of teams. And it's cool to see these kids' projects kind of come to life through a bunch of iterations of parts. We like to see the version numbers. They're like, version 2 for real this time. So there's that. And then, at the college level, there's Formula Baja and Formula SAE, and we sponsor dozens of teams there too. And that to me is something I wish was like a requirement, I guess. When I went to high school, everyone had to take home ec and everyone had to take tech ed. And tech ed was like we'd build a go-kart, we'd build model rockets. We had to run a radio station at one point, but it taught you some things that you may not get exposed to otherwise. And I would hope that at the college level, there would be some sort of like, exposure to manufacturing, just like how you have to take English 101. Maybe you have to volunteer for the Formula SAE team, or here at University of Nevada, Reno, their concrete canoe team is awesome. It's such a cool engineering challenge. It teaches them about manufacturing as well. So, and then cars, of course. I mean, cars are so accessible. Everyone has one. It's just, I'm not sure. I think video games like stole some of the time that a lot of people would have put into cars. They put into video games now. So I think that's our number one competition.
There's probably more politic and subtle ways to phrase this, but basically we buy too much shit and it's very low quality. And I would like for us to at least buy the same amount of stuff, but at higher quality. And I'm hoping or have an instinct that some of the reindustrialization movement that could be happening right now in the US is more about quality and repairability than it is about just trying to ape whatever cheap crap that we've been offshoring for years and then shipping back here. How are you, because you have a lens into the real world of American manufacturing at certain levels and scale that a lot of people don't, just because of your high mix. Like you just have a million, probably literally a million customers. Like what is your top level view right now on what's happening in the movement of reindustrialization? Less about the near term, MAGA tariffs and all of that stuff. Like that's kind of added energy into the discussion. But from a capability standpoint, like how crazy is it to think that we can start building a lot of the goods that we use in the US? And what are we going to have to change to do it right this time?
I go back and forth on that because I actually believe that we already have the capability. Like America manufactures all kinds of amazing stuff, but we just don't make a lot of shit. We don't make these like $1 dresses or whatever that you can get from Shine, but we make really high quality stuff. It's just not as visible to a lot of people. Their exposure to products is going to be on Amazon. On Amazon, it's all these crazy names from offshore companies, and it's garbage
just
products.
Like auto-generated almost, yeah.
Yeah, which is super crazy. It drives me insane. I wish that they could stop that. But people are like, we need to make stuff in the US. We need to make stuff. Well, we do. We do. It's just really difficult to see. And there's a lot of people like on X or Instagram or whatever. They're like, I have to get my stuff made onshore or offshore because I couldn't find a manufacturer. It's because a lot of the manufacturers that have been in business for a very long time are thriving and they're doing well, and they're not seeking, other customers, or maybe they have a really weird niche. I visited a factory the other day, and they make retail display cases. For like if you go into a makeup counter at a mall or whatever, they're the ones who make that display case. We can manufacture like really beautiful stuff, really high-end stuff, and you'd never know who this company is. When people they just search online and they're like, oh, I need a retail display case. You'll never find these people. because they're not out there advertising. Maybe they have an outside sales guy or something like that, but they're not looking for work, and then they're not looking to make one. They're looking to make 100 of them for Estee Lauder or something like that, or Mac. They're not going to make you one for your restaurant in Boise. I think the number one way that we can get more visibility into manufacturing in the U.S. is just wait a little bit. There's people who are taking over these businesses. They are a little bit younger. Maybe they are familiar with the internet, and they're like, "Hey, Dad, can I please, for the love of God, make you a website?" The technology is changing. A lot of the manufacturing equipment that's been in use for so long is due for an upgrade. Some of these machines, they've been running since the 80s, and all of a sudden they're going to get a 2025 version that has Wi-Fi capability, or better alarm handling, so it's going to have better uptime, so they can have more throughput, so they can actually take on more clients. If they need to take on more clients, they'll start advertising, or they'll have decent SEO or a website that can be found. So I'm hoping that there's more of that. Now, you mentioned quality. With quality comes price, and the American consumer has just been poisoned on really, really cheap stuff for a very, very long time. And I don't know if American manufacturers are going to step up and say, "Hey, I want to make this like really cheap shit that everyone wants." If you want to buy a rubber ducky in the US, I don't, you probably could. You could contact an injection molder, get it made, and they're probably going to be $10 each, unless you needed millions of them. Whereas they're a nickel, if you get them from China. I don't know if there's a market for like ultra high quality rubber duckies. Maybe there is, but it's really up to the consumer. So I kind of liked the tariffs briefly, because I was like, oh, good. Maybe it'll stop people from buying this like cheap shit that you don't need. Like, think of how much stuff you've donated to Goodwill or thrown out, or handed down because it was just garbage stuff. My grandparents had pots and pans that they used for, 70 years. They got it from their wedding. I still use my grandfather's tools that were craftsmen, made in the early 1900s. Like, I wish we had more of that, but people have to be willing to pay for it. And I don't know, it's few and far between.
I've been trying to quantify this a little bit, and I'm not real big on movements or labels, but I mean, I'm probably more not accelerationist, maybe that too, but like abundance minded or whatever. Like I'm not trying to get everybody to go back to corduroy and leather. I don't think it's a bad thing to have material goods, but I also think that there's a lot of unaccounted for embodied energy in a lot of the stuff that we have. So to use your rubber ducky example, like you could buy that from Vietnam or China for 5 cents, but the actual cost when it comes to the shipping and the setup and the plastic extraction and all of this stuff is just not in the price. And, there's obvious reasons like different governments of the world subsidizing different parts of manufacturing and all of that. And it's less of like the green or the sustainability factor of that to me is almost like a secondary thing. For me, it's literally more of like some measure of my own autism where I'm like, I just don't think the price is correctly done. You're not valuing the atoms correctly, both in the material and the labor cost that's involved in it. The reason I'm trying to have a better understanding of that, not only just to do my job properly, but it's also to try to figure out if there is a way to message that to especially Americans to say to look again at Made in America as a specific thing. I look forward to seeing a lot more of the younger, modern American companies that are using these processes in this way, like you have tried to bootstrap with Peter and the other people that are doing the toaster challenge, which is to be able to say, if you just need a toaster tomorrow and you need it for $20, this is not it. But if you actually want to pay more for something that is higher quality, beautiful, has some quirkiness even, which I think can be of value, and also is repairable, now there's some options for you there with smaller makers who can do it. How much do you see that as a possible growth or expansion area for SendCutSend?
Yeah, massive. We actually started going down that road about a year ago with our marketplace product. Marketplace, it's kind of like the Etsy of SendCutSend, or the Shopify of SendCutSend, basically. So if you're a designer, you come up with something really cool, you order it, you like it, seems to work, and you think that there's other people who may want that, you can put it up for sale in our marketplace. And so we basically act as Shopify at that point. We will handle the transaction, we'll manufacture it, we will drop ship it directly to your customer. And then you get to set whatever markup you want. So we'll say, hey, man, this is going to be $38.25. But if you want to sell it for, $70, cool, we'll give you the delta. That product is new. I think we have about 1,000 sellers on it right now. And we're already starting to see people who are like, oh my God, I think I can quit my day job because, I'm just making products now and selling. So to be a manufacturer, but then also a provider of this platform that allows, someone like Peter to design a toaster, but then maybe sell, 100 toasters without actually having to become a manufacturer. I think that's really exciting. It's not a solution for everybody. And our own self-imposed limitations limit what you can sell on marketplace. Like we're sheet metal. If your thing needs like wheels or casters or whatever, they usually have to put a bill of materials. They're like, hey, order this from Amazon, order this from McMaster Car, and then place your order with SendCutSend. In the future, we will be able to do kitting, and we'll provide fasteners, we'll provide maybe casters, maybe wheels, maybe who knows what. But it's a step in the right direction for these people to experiment with manufacturing, experiment with being a product designer for a very low risk. And then if it does take off, yeah, we're going to have more graduation parties. People are going to go into manufacturing, and hopefully buy their own equipment, go become a manufacturer, learn everything that we've learned, understand supply chain, figure it out. And it'll be like never ending fun, never ending challenge. But it also like, if we have 1,000 of those or 10,000 of those little manufacturers that pop up in the US, it gives us that kind of base where if there's a few guys that are ordering more machines, then there's more companies that prop up to support those machines. Or maybe there's another 100 guys that are ordering a certain type of material, more material providers will pop up, so it's like the rising tide floats all ships kind of thing. So the more manufacturers there are, the more manufacturers. So I'm hoping for that.
What are some examples of even specifically, if come to mind, like of people who are using the platform and it's cooking for them and their products really selling a lot?
The weirder the niche, the better, especially with car guys. So I think one of them, we're making a lot of skid plates for AMC Eagles, and I didn't know there was that many AMC Eagles still
I was
left.
to say, I would think there would be like 1,000 left. Yeah.
But again, you're not going to go to Summit or Jegs and get a skid plate for an AMC Eagle. So this dude just developed one, and figured it out through a few iterations with SendCutSend and cardboard and who knows what else. Came up with a version that he liked, and then he went on to his forum or his Facebook group or whatever and was like, "Hey, AMC Eagle owners, check this thing out. Go buy it." He gets a little bit of margin every time that he sells one, but he doesn't really have to lift a finger. So as far as like overall popularity, it's really hard to say because if it's going to sell in volume, it already exists on Amazon. We use the example of like a Christmas ornament. If you want a snowflake Christmas ornament, you can go on to Amazon and get one for $1. But if you want a snowflake Christmas ornament that says like Merry Christmas Joel, whatever, then it doesn't exist, but it can exist on Marketplace. Or, you can say, hey, I want this like custom name thing or whatever. So stuff like that we do really well in. So even the Marketplace is very high mix, low volume. It's really cool to kind of see it grow and to see like at internet scale how many weird niches we get into. There was some like adult stuff I can't really talk about. It's just wild.
With sheet metal. I literally, when you say adult sheet metal, 0 ideas come to mind. But now I will go browse the Marketplace and see if I can.
It's terrible. Yeah, no, please don't find it.
I mean, what you have done, and is that you're de-risking for those entrepreneurs in a way that has been hard for a long time. Everybody, the mythical American story is the garage builder, software or hardware, who then, reaches a certain scale and is able to start a business. But the reality is like the cap expense of even just home scale machines is not nothing. And even the labor and all of that stuff, like you've de-risked it up to a certain scale to be able to test a market and also sustain it at a certain amount of time, and then allow people to learn like the marketing part and the customer outreach and the returns, and like and really develop it without having to go all in, which I think is really cool. Where are you at now from a big machine standpoint? Because like that's obviously you've got 3 facilities, you have fairly similar capabilities across those. Like, and when you make a capability increase, it has to integrate into the rest of your Lego tool system that you're allowing. Like, I know you've just bought like some bigger laser cutters and things, but into the nitty gritty, like what are some immediate like new capabilities and materials that SendCutSend is bringing online?
Tube laser is a big one for us, being able to handle, circular and square and rectangle tube, and laser cut that accurately. That's a new one. The biggest one for sure is CNC machining. So we actually have 4 more machines landing tomorrow, and we'll never have enough. CNC machining is so weird compared to sheet metal because we can load up one piece of sheet metal and cut hundreds of parts out of it. With CNC machine, it's one at a time, so you need a lot of machines. The machines, in order to do it right, are costly, and they're power hungry too. So we've secured more square footage. Actually, the building I'm in Reno 2 right now, which is about 50,000 square foot. And then we're getting the building next door too, which we're going to call Reno 3, and that's about another 80,000 square feet. And we're trying to fill those with CNC machines. Lots of investment there, but we've had the demand. Like you said, de-risking with marketplace. We've been able to de-risk that a little bit just by communicating with our customers, seeing what they're doing. Where they use other companies outside of SendCutSend when they're actually building a project. And a lot of those guys are using CNC. The issue with CNC is you add that third dimension in there, and everything gets really, really crazy. It gets super complex. But that's our big focus right now. And then at the same time, in parallel, we have to do everything that we do every day. So every time we add a new vertical, it takes a bunch of time and effort and distraction from the team in order to get it off the ground. But then we have to do all the day-to-day stuff and the continual process improvement too. We're not perfect by any means, and we're always trying to like stretch our capabilities and say yes to more things that come in the door. We talk about educating our customers on the constraints and how to design for In-N-Out Burger. But at some point, maybe we should be, closer to McDonald's, where maybe there's a salad for people who want a salad, right? So it's just this, we have a lot of balls up in the air, and I love it. But it's sometimes difficult to be like all things to all people. Because we run out of hours in the day, it kind of forces us to pick what's really critical. So it's continue doing what we do and refining the recipe until it's perfect, and then having these big moonshots on the side.
Obviously a point where you would be doing too much, right? Like, because the end goal would be that you can do any type of manufacturing available on the planet. And that's obviously a lovely dream, but it would be a really hard business to build and scale and still operate and keep your quality levels and all that stuff. So where you're already at the edge of that threshold, just getting into CNC, which is like, wow, that's a totally, it seems like it should be a very similar problem to solve, but it's like not. And so I think you're headed in the right direction, but yeah, you're never going to quite know, is this the step too far in service offering that we shouldn't have done? On the machines too, like the space, talent, all of that is a factor. Cost. Have you been able to get the machines though? Have you been like limited on just even being able to buy them from a supply standpoint, where whatever machines you're buying, or are they largely still around if you've got the money to spend?
Yeah, there's not like a clear answer there. Our biggest constraint is on cash. So we're bootstrapped. One of the things that keeps us from growing too fast is, well, we're bootstrapped. So if I had a VC round for $100 million, I would have fallen on my face a long time ago. We would have grown too fast. We would have got too cocky and failed. So by using our own profits and reinvesting back into the company, it forces us to go a certain pace. I'm very, very impulsive. I move very quickly. So money is a good constraint for us so that we don't get too far out on our skis. For the machines, they are available. We're using a mix of different manufacturers. We use Haas, and then we use Matsura, which is out of Japan. The Matsura machines, they only make about one a month. So luckily for us, we can only afford about one a month. Uh, but we are taking more of their capacity than I think they planned on. So it's forced us to look at other machines as well. There's Grobe, who's a great German company that we're looking at. There's Hermela. There's a bunch of different machines that have different capabilities. So with sheet metal, a good laser can cut every material, every geometry, do it really well. But in CNC machining, there's going to be certain machines that are better suited for certain geometry, and we just need to discover what that mix is. So our bell curve right now looks like a Richter scale. It's not a bell curve. It's terrible. Looks like sawtooths. But over time, it'll start to look like a bell curve, and we'll know exactly what types of machines we need, where, what size billets, what materials are popular. But it's all just going to be something that we discover. But we know that recipe, and we're patient, and we are really good at how quick we react. We don't plan very well, but we react really, really damn good.
It's good that you know what type of leader and founder you are, because I'm not anti the VC model. Sometimes vaporizing a bunch of cash gets you a lead position, and you can do certain things with that model. It is also statistically unlikely to build sustainable businesses, or otherwise every VC would be rich and all those companies would be successful. So I think good on you for knowing what you're good at and what you're not. I will just underline too for the audience, like, it's crazy that and this is a subject for another conversation another time, but another place where I've been spending a bunch of my time is trying to understand global capacity for these machines, like, or for the people who make the machines. And it is the in the last 10 years, with the Taiwanese threat from China and TSMC, also ASML, there's only a handful of companies and only a handful of machines on the planet that make things that everyone thinks, well, if all of these devices have these parts in them, there must just be like over capacity in the machines. And that's not true. And a lot of that is still sitting, thankfully for the West and for America, in Japan, in Germany, Korea, in other industries. Like, that is there. But I just want to underline that it's such an interesting thing where you're talking to a CNC company out of Japan. I don't know how long or how old they are, but that's a fairly well-known CNC company. And you are already able to almost buy out their capacity. And SendCutSend, while it is large, is not like Apple. Like, you're already affecting like some of that. So because this isn't a car podcast, but we talk about cars on every podcast, I will end by saying, what are your current cars and projects? And is there anything, when you're talking about being customer one of SendCutSend, like, what is something that you're actually trying to crack right now in one of your project cars that you had you had to be SendCutSend to be able to do?
Yeah, my customer number one project was Tesla. It was my Tesla powered 1981 Honda Accord set up like a gasser. So you'll have to search it. It's the ugliest thing you've ever seen, but it's super fun. So putting an electric drive unit into a first gen Honda Accord was a huge challenge. Needed a lot of custom parts for that. Current cars, I have my 79 Trans Am, which has the LSA in it from a CTSV, and that's undergoing suspension and brake upgrades desperately. I completely ran out of brakes the other day, so it's gonna go.
Designed by a real tuner. I put a 700 horsepower engine into my car from the 70s, and now I can't stop.
Yeah, not at all. And always add horsepower before braking. That's just what you do. And then I have I got Tesla in the garage down at my mom's house. The Trans Am you saw earlier in a sneak peek out in the shop. And then I have a 77 450 6.9 Mercedes that I just recently rescued from the shop. I forgot that I owned it because it had been there for 2 years. Now I'm like, okay, I'm just going to get this thing on the road. It overheats, but the suspension finally works. So that thing's a blast. The next project, I don't know. It's so hard for me to work on cars right now because there's so many needs in the company. Like it's satisfying in a car way to go out on the shop floor and like make a conveyor return, or to, improve some sort of cooling or something like that on a machine. It's the same skills that you would apply to a car, but you can like do it in an afternoon instead of laying on your back for 3 days trying to swap a transmission or something like that. So my car projects tend to be on the shop floor right now. But yeah, the transmission or the Trans Am, getting all the new suspension in that, and I'm curious what parts we'll be able to make for that. I'll just find out when I get under it, I guess.
All right. Well, get enthused about brakes. They're not as fun as motors, but we need you alive to continue to grow SendCutSend. Jim Belosic, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was awesome.